This episode of the Alpha Nerds podcast is brought to you by Sponch. Good.
Welcome back to the Alpha Nerds podcast. Call Alpha Nerds, that's our name. That name again is Alpha Nerds. I'm Pete.
I'm Bart.
And every week we talk about a franchise, movie, comic book series, or any other thing that we like that starts with a certain letter. This week's letter is H.
H of Helaman, hierarchy. Hey there, hey guy. Hi.
Happy hippos hovering over Herbert Hoover, the horny horticulturist who has herpes.
Who brought out horticulture? Man, go.
All right, so let's see. We have 5 honorable mentions, as we do every week. And Bart, why don't you kick us off with the honorable mentions?
Sure. My first one is Harry and the Hendersons. It's a movie that came on way back in the day. The makeup effects were done by a dude called Rick Baker, who is just the king of Hollywood special effects.
Always awesome.
Yeah. Next one is Halloween Town, which came on when I was a kid. The first one
I remember that movie. Love that movie.
Subtitle of that movie is Sophie, the most powerful witch in the universe, and her sister Marnie, who doesn't do anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Dude, Marnie doesn't do anything. Sophie does anything having to do with magic, which I get is the joke, but it's like sad.
Yeah.
Third one is How High. Did you ever watch that movie?
I did. Yeah.
I love that movie. Me and my brother watch that one all the time.
Yeah, that used to run on Comedy Central every Saturday almost. I think like Comedy Central just had like its little stoner lineup or its like Hangover Saturdays lineup.
Okay, so they had the movies they play all the time were like Van Wilder, How High, Ghostbusters 2, something else, something I can't think of.
Out Cold, I think.
Oh yeah, Out Cold was great. But How High, one of my favorite lines in that is when they're smoking in the car and the ghost of Ivory appears in the back.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, what happened to the blunt? He's like, I gave it to that dude in the back. And Meth Man turns around, he's like, yo man, that's Ivory. Yo man, that's the Ivory. That's the Ivory. I love that movie. And then
It is.
when they're about to fail out and they got the blender and they're putting like John Adams' fingers in it to try to like blend it to smoke it.
Man, that's good. That's good stuff.
Best character in the movie. I need money. I need money. Fourth on my list is Harlem Globetrotters, which Harlem Globetrotters I've never seen. We've just heard of them from like media out there, and they're famous because they're in New York, and like a bunch of TV shows are made in New York. And
Yeah.
that cartoon show on when we like back in the 70s, where they'd like transform into stuff. Like Harlem Globetrotters are ridiculously famous, and they made a song famous.
Yes, they did. Sweet Georgia Brown.
Yeah. And the last one for me is Hannibal. Did you ever see that movie?
Yes, many times.
So, sequel to The Silence of the Lambs, where the enemy is Gary Oldman with like messed up face.
Yep.
I can vividly see the scene where he's telling Clarice about how Hannibal got him high, and then he was telling him to like cut his face open, and it's like a blurry like sepia tone flashback with Anthony Hopkins in a wig, and I remember like I can still see that.
Yeah.
So that's my 5.
All right. So my 5 are Harry Potter.
Nice.
And, well, there was one thing I saw online that was actually, like, pretty good argument. And that is, if your favorite character in Harry Potter is Harry Potter, you haven't read Harry Potter.
Yeah, I haven't really read the book, so I can't say much.
Second is Harry Partridge. If you don't know who he is, he's a animator who puts his stuff up on YouTube, and he's not like your contemporary animator who like uses a whole thing. Like he uses Flash, but he draws every single frame,
which is crazy at this point.
Is absolutely batshit nuts. And he also did a animated intro for Riff Tracks, which it's such a good intro, and his animation style is awesome. It's really fun to watch. He's got a sort of series called Starbarians. Super funny. Oh my god. So it's kind of like it's kind of a spin-off of those Saturday morning cartoons, but it's like rated R. So it's amazing. Let's see. Third is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Amazing books.
So good.
And really good. Great. Really good movie. Even though a lot of people didn't like the movie, I dug the movie. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought it was good too. I thought that Martin Freeman made an amazing Arthur Dent.
He did fantastic. I love the dude who played Slaughter Bartyfast.
Yeah. Oh my god, yes. That was great. Let's see. Also we had hang on.
Click starts with
Alan.
a C.
We had Alan Rickman as
Marvin
the android.
And I love the design for Marvin, the like big lovable round head.
He's got a plush toy dimensions to his body.
Yes.
And he's just walking around just basically telling everyone how doomed they are, and it's just so great. Audiobooks. The first audiobook is read by Stephen Fry, and the rest are read by Martin Freeman, so freaking free commercial for Audible. Go and get that, because it's amazing. Let's see. Next on my list is Hellsing, which started as a manga. Well, first started as an anime, then they made a manga, and then they made another anime that was more loyal to the manga. And honestly, the manga is a much better story than the original anime. Just so good. And okay, so it's your typical, like, it's basically Hellboy, another H, but with vampires.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, there are monsters out there, so we're going to use our badass monster to kill all the other monsters. Yeah. And so they do. And it's awesome, and it's super gory, like really gory. And Team 4-Star has an abridged series on Hellsing Ultimate, which is the series based on the manga, and it's hilarious, so go ahead and watch that as well.
See, I read the first manga, and I liked it, but I didn't really dig the show. But the thing I loved about like the most was it did that like Japanese thing where they like go deep into like Christian mythology to be like, okay, so we're going to have the Catholic Church, and we're going to have them as this big evil figure, which has been done before. They're going to have a league of genetically modified assassins. This is new. Named after Judas. This is kind of strange, but okay, let's go.
Pretty much. And also when the Catholic, okay, so into the story, there's like a huge war between, and stay with me, Nazi vampires versus the Catholic Church, specifically the Iscariot organization, and all of the Christian, all the Catholic soldiers are, there's no simple way, there's no not bad way to put this, they're all dressed like Klansmen.
Okay.
And they're doing this, like, unironically. And it's like, you're just sitting there like, huh? Oh my god.
I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't want to watch this.
Well, you're not really rooting for either side in this fight.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're just kind of like watching this unfold. And it's like, okay, I kind of hope they both just destroy each other. Anyway, my last entry is Hella, and that's not the adjective or adverb form where you want to say something is hella awesome. No, I'm talking about Hela, who is Loki's daughter in Norse mythology and queen of the underworld, also known as Helheim, which is, it's translated to Hela's domain.
Yeah, and she'll actually be the villain in Thor Ragnarok coming up in, what is that, like 2 months from now? It's November, right?
I want to say, yeah. But, oh my god, her design looks so amazing.
It looks really good, and it did the Loki thing, where it's true to the comics enough, but it still looks really good.
Yeah. And, okay, so there's one interesting little thing from Norse mythology that I want to talk about with Hela, and that is it's how they explain earthquakes. And it's because Loki, having basically orchestrated Balder dying, who is like the most beloved of the Norse gods, gets sentenced to be forever chained at the center of the earth, and clung to a stalactite above him is a venomous snake, whose venom drips from its fangs and right into Loki's eyes. And this causes him to like just thrash around madly, and he basically shakes the earth with his thrashing. But his daughter, being loving towards her father, keeps a bowl above his eyes to catch all the venom. But when the bowl fills up, she has to go over to a nearby chasm and dump out the bowl, which leaves Loki's eyes unprotected from drops of snake venom. And there go more earthquakes.
Nice.
And that's where Loki will spend eternity.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Family ties.
I love Norse mythology. Like, one of my favorite ones is Thor is out like he's out like hunting or something, and he needs to stay inside somebody's house for the night, but they don't have any food. So he takes one of the goats off his like chariot and like kills it and keeps the bones and keeps, I think, the fur.
No, just the bones.
Okay, he keeps the bones.
Or no, does he keep the fur? He probably does.
I might be getting confused with another one. Anyways, he keeps the bones, and he tells them, like, okay, nobody touch the bones, and then, like, we can just eat goat meat. And they're like, oh, cool. And then one of the sons is like, oh, man, I want some of that marrow. So he takes one of the bones and, like, breaks it open, or, like, the one I read, he, like, notches it open and sucks the marrow out.
Yeah.
And then Thor wakes up the next morning, takes the bones, makes new goats out of the bones, except one of them has a limp. And he's like, oi, what's wrong? He's like, oh, yeah, our kid took some of the bones. Man, I don't remember how that story ends. I just remember the bones.
I think Thor just, like, beats the shit out of the kid. Like, I told you to do one thing. I didn't even tell you to do one thing. I told you not to do one thing.
There is one thing that you could not eat, and you ate it anyways, and that's why I kicked you out of the garden. Wait. Anyhow,
but yeah, it was like those goats were very special to Thor. They were like his, you know, they were the steeds of his chariot.
Yeah, like nobody just has like an animal in Norse or like any mythology. Like you don't have like, oh, this is my horse. No, the horse has like a name and like
it's 4 extra legs.
Yeah. Okay, so
if it's Odin's horse anyway.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about Odin. We can talk about him during because we need to actually start the show.
Yeah. So, Bart, why don't you kick us off and tell us what thing you want to talk about this week?
So, my topic this week is Highlander, the old film from 1986.
So good.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my God.
So, first couple trivia questions. How do you kill an immortal?
You got to cut off their head.
What type of sword does Connor McLeod use?
Do you mean like
modern day Connor?
Oh shit. Okay. In my defense, it's been like 5 or 6 years since I last saw this movie. So
oh wow. Oh, yeah, man, we gotta watch it again.
Yeah.
Immortals can't fight where?
Hallowed ground?
Churches, but yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And how many can there be?
If memory serves, I think there can only be one.
There can only be one. Yes.
Well, there can be only one.
They say it both ways.
Yeah.
Or no, I think they do only say there can be only one. Anyways, he uses a katana. In modern times. In ancient times, he used it's like a Scottish broadsword. It's not even a claymore.
Yeah, but, it's like it's your standard greatsword.
Right. So released 1986, soundtrack by Queen. The one sentence that makes you want to watch a movie.
Yes.
And I looked this up. There's only 3 movies that Queen did the soundtrack for. One was this one was Flash Gordon, and the last one was they did the title song, not even the full soundtrack, for a movie called Iron Eagle.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's get into Highlander. Highlander is one of those movies where like it has a bunch of rules, and for some reason as a society we love movies with rules.
Yes. Yeah.
We love
especially like if they introduce like either some kind of lore or some kind of pseudoscience, especially like time travel, then yeah, we love rules.
Like we love our Fight Clubs, we love our Gremlins, we love things that establish like certain rules to it.
Yes.
So opening scene of the movie is okay, players. I'm not going to forget this time to establish the players first. We have Christopher Lambert playing the title character, who's a French actor playing a Scottish actor. We have Sean Connery playing a character called Ramirez, who is a Scottish actor playing an Egyptian Spaniard guy. And we have
what was he? Juan Sanchez Villalobos?
Ramirez.
Ah, that's right.
And we have Clancy Brown, who's an American actor playing the Kurgan. Clancy Brown was in Buckaroo Banzai. Clancy Brown was the voice of Mr. Krabs. Clancy Brown played General in the 2nd season of Daredevil, and he did a fantastic job at that.
That's right, he did, yeah.
Yeah. Clancy Brown is just that guy with just the big booming voice. He played Lex Luthor on the old Superman and Justice League cartoons.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Everything comes back. But so opening scene is they're at like a wrestling match. And it's just Connor, and he's like looking into the crowd, and it reminds him of war, which I don't see why, because it's a wrestling match.
Well, maybe Scottish war.
Maybe. So he goes to the wrestling match, and he's like feeling weird, so he like leaves, and he ends up downtown. He ends up in the parking garage, and that's when another guy named I can't remember his name. It's when another character like sees him, like pulls out his sword. Connor pulls out his sword, and they start this big fight.
Oh,
and this movie, like, I love Highlander. I love it. Not everything about Highlander. Well, maybe the first one, but it's not the best movie. Some of the acting's terrible. Some of the writing is awful.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Kurgan looks like he should be in a metal band and not like the main villain of a movie. But dude, the scene where there's a scene where he fights Ramirez and he busts through the door, but he's wearing this like a big long black wig, and he looks like he's like Dee Snider's bassist.
Huh.
Yeah, like watch it again. He's just like, brr. But the parking lot scene is really, really good because they bust out a lot of special effects. They hooked up stuff for the lights. They're cutting through like steam pipes and water pipes, and they cause because of the sparks that are coming off their swords, I think they make the sprinklers go off. It's like, I love this scene because it's all just like, it's a good sword fight on a like movie, but the dudes aren't wearing armor. They're just wearing clothes. If they get stabbed, like, it hurts a lot. He ends up cutting off the other guy's head, and then it goes to a quickening, one of the like many quickening scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And the quickening is them staring into a light and going, oh, while stuff happens. Like, so the quickening is one of the worst. Like, it's not the worst part of the movie. It's like iconic part of the movie, but they don't explain what it is, what it does, or what they get out of it. It's like you kill an immortal, you get a quickening. Does it make you stronger? Not really. You just get a quickening.
You remember when South Park did a quickening?
Vaguely.
At the Apple Store?
No.
It's just like, bah! And light was shooting between everybody's mouths.
Oh, yeah. Bah!
Oh, that was
I do remember that. But yeah, like they keep saying it throughout the movie. There's a scene where Ramirez is training with Connor, and he like points to the deer, and he's like, "Feel the deer. Feel the deer's heartbeats. Do you feel that?" He's like, "I feel it." He's like, "That's the quickening." And then they run across the beach, and the music swells, and there's this big shot as it pulls back from them running, and I'm like, "Wait, that's the quickening? I thought the other thing was the quickening. What's a quickening?" Everything's a quickening. When you like butter your toast and then you like drop it and it lands butter side up, that's a quickening.
I'm gonna say that every time that happens now.
The quickening. But they're very like pumped about it. Anyway, so after the scene in the parking lot, which is really good, there's a battle scene which takes place in like 15th or 14th century Scotland, where it's Connor and the other members of the Clan MacLeod going off to fight their rivals. And the rivals have the Kurgan with them. And this is the first time you actually see him in the movie, I think. And he's looking like a dude out of Gwar. Just like a big skull helmet, like big long black hair, like huge shoulder pads. And his sword is awesome looking. There's a scene later on where he like comes to America and he's like putting together his sword and he's like sliding bits into bits and he like finishes assembling it, and then the two little spikes like pop out of the guard on the bottom. And it looks so sick.
That is cool.
So the first time he sees him is at the battle scene where he says, "MacLeod or Connor is mine. Nobody can touch him, and then I'll help you win." And then they go to the battle scene and nobody's fighting Connor because they're not supposed to, and they're like afraid of him. And then the Kurgan comes out looking like, you know, just pure evil and stabs him in the side and like through the lung and like in there. And this is one of those times where the acting's terrible because Christopher Lambert's like, it's so bad.
Oh my god.
But he takes a sword out, Connor falls on his knees, lifts up the sword. "There can be only one." And then Connor's like fellow clansmen like tackle the Kurgan and like get him away. And then he goes back to his village. He's like dying. His girlfriend's crying. Couple days or like the next day or like 2 days later, he pops up and he's like totally fine. And he's like, and he goes to the bar and they're like, "This isn't natural, Connor. Like this isn't right." And his girlfriend's like, "He's an eager Lucifer." It's one of those. Why would you say that? Why would you say that? We're in the Middle Ages. You're gonna get me killed. So then they kick him out of his village, and he goes away. Then it cuts back to modern times, and nothing really interesting happens in modern times. It's kind of the worst part of the movie.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to ancient Scotland, which is good. So Connor's living alone just in this like hut in the middle of the mountains with his new girlfriend, Heather, or wife. I'm not really sure what their relationship is. And that's when Ramirez shows up. So Sean Connery playing a big dude wearing like all red, working for the Queen of Spain, even though he's Egyptian and even though he lived in Japan and carries a samurai sword. But we're not going to worry about that.
No.
It's just, I understand what they were doing. They're trying to show like, no, these people, like this has been going on for millennia. Like it's never going to stop. But they didn't want to do it. So whatever. So then he, like when Connor's like next to him, he like feels pain. And he's like, "You felt this before when you felt the Kurgan. It's a quickening." It's like, no, it's not a quickening. This isn't a quickening. And they start training together. Ramirez is like, the banter between those two is probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
Although hearing Sean Connery, like, because there's a scene where they're in the boat, he's like, "Why do you eat this? Why don't you eat something good like haggis?" And he's like, "Haggis? What's that?" He's like, Sean Connery. You're Sean Connery. He's like, "Sheep's milk and rice." Or not sheep's milk and rice, sheep's stomach and rice. It's like, okay.
Oh my god.
But yeah, and then they go through the training montages. He gets them ready. Goes back to modern time. You see the like museum curator who's like trying to track down where the sword came from, because the little bits of his sword that were like left in like concrete walls and stuff like that show this is a sword that was made with like 200 plus years of techniques before they should have been. even though you can't carbon date steel. But we're gonna ignore that.
Yeah.
So it goes with her. It's dealing with her, and she's going on a date with Connor because she's trying to figure out like what his deal is, because what he's been doing is living in New York. He'll die, then he'll leave all of his inheritance to like identity that he'd stolen, usually like a baby that died at birth.
Yeah.
And then just continue living his life. There's an awesome scene where it goes back to World War II, where he's in like France, I think it's France, where he like covers up a girl to like protect her from being shot by the Nazis. She's like, "You're still alive." He's like, "Shh, it's a kind of magic." And then like he like knocks down the Nazi, steals his gun, is like facing him, and the German's like, "Das ist da, das ist da." He's like, "Whatever you say, Jack," and just shoots him with a machine gun. Which probably would have been better with like an American or a Scottish actor, but it's when, "Hey, whatever do you say, Jack?" Like, "Oh, okay." Good job, Christopher Lambert. And I love Christopher Lambert. Man. But yeah. So the like two big things that happen, or rather, Ramirez explains the rules of the Highlander to him. Like going back to Ramirez, the rules are: in order to kill an immortal, you have to cut off his head. In order to, you can't kill anybody on hallowed ground or on sacred ground, and that's a rule that just everybody follows, even the Kurgan. You can't, once there's a few enough immortals around, then there'll be a quickening and they'll all be like summoned to the same place. They'll just feel like they should go there.
Right.
And that is also called the quickening, I think. And then once there's one left, then that person receives the prize. And the prize is important. They just don't know why the prize is important. So the Kurgan is just offing everybody that he sees. There's a scene where he kills you meet a character called Castigaire, who's a friend of Connor's from like back during like before the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Kurgan just offs him in an alley, gets the quickening, like stumbles over to a car, rips off the roof, pulls the old man who's driving out, sits down in the seat, looks over to see like an old lady sitting next to him. He's like, "Mom." And she's screaming her head off, and then he drives away, and she's like trying to climb out of the car, and she's like holding on to the roof and that kind of thing.
Yeesh.
Yeah. And I really like Castiguaire's like how you meet him, because earlier in the movie, Connor's drinking some wine, and she's like, "Oh, this must be very expensive." He's like, 1763, or 1783, the year England made its peace treaty with the U.S. for the American Revolution. Of the year this happened, it was a very good year. And then when he meets Castiguaire, he's been like, "What was the last time I saw you?" It's like, "Oh, I think it was 1783." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of neat." And the dueling scene. So the dueling scene happens right after this, where it takes place like back in France. Connor is just drunk as a skunk, and this guy just like wants to duel him, takes out a sword, and Connor's like, "Okay, let's go." And he like stabs him, takes out a sword, sheaths the sword, and goes to walk away. And then Connor's like, okay, we can fight now. Okay, I'm good. Like, takes it again, stabs him again. It's like a
my God.
5-minute throwaway scene, but it's good. So Ramirez dies in an awesome way, because Connor's house is shaped kind of like a tower.
Yeah.
And Ramirez feels the Kurgan coming, tells Heather to hide, and they end up like, when he like, one of the first things he does is like cut the Kurgan's throat out, and you could see the scar later on in the movie.
Yeah.
And they're like fighting up the like stairs, and then the wind's blowing because there's a storm going on at the same time, because like they're intertwined with like nature, which is another good connection.
Nice.
And like the top of the castle gets knocked off, and like they're standing on the stairs, and then he thinks he has a Kurgan's on the rope, and then when the Kurgan like threatens to kill the girl, Kurgan like gets him underneath the ribs, and like, "Ah!" and he like falls. Kurgan offs his head, like quickens, and then you don't see what happens after that, but it's like the thunder and the lightning and just him just like totally defeated. It's really good.
Yeah.
And then not too long after this, you see a scene where Heather is old because she somehow got away from the Kurgan. And you see Connor talking to her saying like, can't you see it? Like, we're out in the fields, we're walking around, all this like nice stuff. It's a really sweet death scene.
Nice. Yeah, it really is.
And then there's a scene where he goes, where it's back in modern times, the like antique dealer like is finally suspecting him of stuff, or not the antique dealer, the like forensic scientist is expecting stuff. He goes, I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, and I am immortal, and stabs himself with a knife to prove that he's immortal.
Huh.
And then they start making out, and that's the part where I'm like, yeah, maybe this isn't the best movie.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's one of those, this is awkward. Anyways, the Kurgan, like, there's an awesome scene where MacLeod is talking to Heather because every year on her birthday he like lights a candle for her at a church.
Yeah.
And the Kurgan shows up with like a bald head, like looking like a guy out of the punk scene in the 80s, like, I killed Castigar. We're the only two left. Let's make this happen. And it's like taunting him on like how he killed Ramirez and all this stuff. Kurgan ends up stealing like modern woman. I don't even remember her name. She's not that important. And they end up fighting on the top of this building. And what they did for like the sword fights, because like there's sparks every time they're like hitting each other with the swords. And what they did was they took car batteries, hooked up cables like up their pant legs and up their shirts and then out their sleeves, and hooked that to the swords, where every time they hit, that would make the sparks. Yeah.
Nice.
And the last fight is like climbing over this building and knocking down neon signs, and the girl's in the background screaming because of course she is.
Of course.
They end up like rolling around and like wrestling with each other, and they end up falling through a ceiling into a empty warehouse. And this is the best shot in the movie, because that last bit where they're like fighting is all, it's kind of like that scene in Kill Bill where it's just the silhouettes fighting, the shadows fighting against the lighted background.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he finally just like cuts open the Kurgan like a bit, and you can see like the light like coming out of like a crack in his neck. He's like, and like all the energy flies out of him, and then there's like cartoon dragons. Like the animation in this part's really good, flying around. Such a good film. And then he like, it like all comes back up to him, and the camera zooms in on his face and goes, there could be only one. And then like it explodes, and then just every window in the warehouse shatters. It's awesome.
It really is. Yeah.
I love Highlander.
Probably one of my favorite boss fight scenes anyway.
Yeah. Like, and it's so good. Like, even though the best parts are like back in the day, like that last scene is really, really, really good.
It really is. Yeah. It holds up.
Yeah, the movie holds up because it's not that deep of a movie. It's like pretty shallow. But again, soundtrack by Queen, Princes of the Universe. Like, it holds up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really good. And then they made a second one. That was terrible.
Oh God.
They made a third one, and I've never seen the second one. I've seen the third one, and from what I've read about the second one, I hate the third one more. Because they basically like took how the immortals work and made them like experience levels. Like, if you kill an immortal, you get all of his kills that he had for yourself.
Huh.
And then there's a guy that had like 500 kills, and Connor and the other MacLeod who he's with are like at like 250 apiece, and so one of them has to kill the other one to get ahead. That is stupid. It's really dumb.
That is really dumb. Yeah.
It's one of those, this shows you how strong you are with a sword. That's not how sword fighting works. But okay.
Oh man.
And then they made a TV show. The TV show broke all the rules that were set in the movies because the writers needed to like put a twist on it. So
yeah, the writers need to like basically retcon the whole thing.
They made a comic book, which is worse because it's just badly drawn versions while they're doing this destroying of all the like continuity that we've built.
Yeah.
Like he's hanging out with his cousin who was also an immortal, at the same time that they're talking about how he won the prize which is gotten by killing all the immortals. Like, it's like they just can't see that, like, no, you can't have a sequel to this movie that still has the immortals. Like, what they should have done is basically just, like, reset it. Like, Highlander 2 is, once again, immortals going around with swords, lopping each other's heads off, except maybe Christopher Lambert's the main character, maybe he's not. And we're looking at, like, different, like, think of it like Legend of Zelda. You're just resetting all the characters.
Yeah.
So now we're having, maybe Clancy Brown's not the Kurgan, maybe he's like the friend who trained Sean Connery. And maybe Christopher Lambert's the bad guy now, or something like that. Just like reset it with like different characters, different settings. Like, it doesn't all have to be just like the Scottish Highlands, even though they are very pretty. I like that much more. I don't want, like, gosh, when they brought in aliens, that was not good.
Why do writers have to, like, they take a good fantasy element and then they try and introduce aliens?
I will say it made sense with Indiana Jones.
It didn't make sense with Indiana Jones, though.
It did, though. Like, because
it didn't.
He was referencing, like, the B movie aliens from, like, that period. If it hadn't been like Greylings, I think it would have been more acceptable. If it had been like, I don't know, floating head in a jar type aliens.
Ugh.
But yeah, seeing the Greys next to, like, Harrison Ford and that wasn't the worst part of that movie. Tarzan Shia LaBeouf was the worst part of that movie.
Ugh.
Okay, and that's pretty much all I have to say about Highlander. Pete, what do you know about Highlander?
I mean, what can I say that you haven't already gone over? So, it was one of my first exposures to Sean Connery.
Oh, nice.
So, there's that.
I love it. Like, it's a cheesy 80s movie, but it doesn't have to be deep. Like, it's fun to imagine, to play around that world. Okay, what did this guy do to get to this point?
Yeah.
I'd like to see
I do remember, like, one infomercial, though, way back when I was a kid, and the Highlander TV show was still going on.
Yeah.
And it was an infomercial because they were selling replicas of all the swords in the show.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, those are so cool. But, you know, they were like hundreds of dollars each. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, just don't.
Because, you know, little 12-year-old me is sitting there like, I got $18.
I could use a sword. I mean, I don't really need a sword, but I could use one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all I got for Highlander. What do you got for us this week, Pete?
This week I want to talk about Harrow County.
I've never heard of that. What is it?
Okay, so it's a graphic novel series, and it's like sort of a horror genre, which I really enjoyed because I don't think that horror gets like enough of the spotlight, especially in graphic novels.
Yeah.
So it was written by, well, it's still ongoing. So it started in 2015, and right now it's got 5 volumes that have already been released. And it was written by Cullen Brunn, who also wrote Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
Oh yeah, I hear good things about that, but I've never actually like messed around with
it. It's a good one. It's messed up, but you know it's Deadpool, so yeah, it's a good read. It was published by Dark Horse, and because of its rising popularity, they're actually talking about making a TV series adaptation.
Oh, cool.
So,
who's our cast of characters?
Well, the cast of characters, it takes place in like this sort of small farm town in the American South. And, you know, they basically set up, we're looking at a time between the Emancipation Proclamation but before the Civil Rights Movement.
Okay.
So, yeah. But, you know, they're trying to kind of played off like this is like a farming town in the South that, you know, they're not super against black people, but they don't exactly like live in the same town. So it's like it throws out that like separate but equal but not really kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the first volume called Countless Haints. Now, if you're from the South, or if you're familiar with like this sort of storytelling, haints is basically, you know, your ghosts and goblins, your bumps in the night, and the things under your bed. Those are haints.
Huh, I never heard of that.
So, yeah. So it starts with this girl who... it doesn't start with this girl. It starts with this witch named Hester, and she gets burned at the stake.
Hardcore.
Well, okay, she gets stuffed in a tree, and then the tree gets set on fire.
Okay.
So, kind of like being burned in the stake, but whatever. So, you know, she basically proclaims like, "Oh, I'll be back," as, you know, magical villains are wont to do. And, you know, a couple of months after Hester has been dead, they check on the tree, and in the roots is a baby. Oh my god! It's a baby!
Okay.
So, immediately, the townsfolk are kind of divided, where it's like, oh my god, it's a baby. Somebody, you know, feed it or something. We gotta take care of it. And then the other people are like, that is clearly Hester reincarnated. Let's stab it.
So, you know, differing opinions, but we should hear both parties out.
Yeah. So, they finally, like, come to an agreement where it's like, okay, listen, I'm really not comfortable stabbing a baby. Plus, it's possible that this baby could have just been abandoned here. So, you know, you really want to stab a baby just because, like, we found it where we burned a witch a couple of months ago? No, come on.
Correlation, causation, people. Come on.
Yeah.
So, Forest Baby, what's her name?
Shit. It's been a while since I read it. Give me a sec. Emmy. Emmy. Okay. So, yeah, just had to consult my notes here. Yeah, her name's Emmy, and, you know, she's... she grows up pretty normal, but, you know, she kind of, like, has, you know, weird feelings every so often. Like, she kind of... she gets a weird vibe from the woods, as most people want to do, because the woods are spooky, and that's where all the crazy shit happens in our stories. So yeah, why not be a little wary of the woods?
Okay.
But then, you know, it comes down to her 18th birthday. And this is when... Okay, so the townspeople are like, okay, so listen, I'm not comfortable stabbing a baby. So, we'll wait until she's 18. If she exhibits any signs of witchcraft or being a witch, or if she suddenly starts wanting us to call her Hester, then we'll stab her. And so they're like, yeah, okay, fair enough. So, she... it's like a day or two before her 18th birthday. And, you know, she's just, like, out in town, and then, like, oh, she spots something, like, kind of out of the corner of her eye. Not quite sure what she saw, but she's gonna follow it. Sure, okay. And she basically follows it, and it's, like, this boy that she's never seen before. And he's not saying anything, he's just, like, looking at her. And then he keeps running away. And then she follows him. And then he, lather, rinse, repeat. He stops, looks at her, runs away. She follows. He stops, looks at her, runs away. She follows.
I would do this 3 times, and then I would say, like, nah, he can do his own thing. I don't care anymore.
So, follows him into, like, a swamp. And then he kind of goes into, like, a sort of briar patch. Thorns and, like, twisted branches and everything like that. And she, like, kind of crawls in after him. She's getting all scratched up and everything. And she follows to where it ends, and there's his skin.
Gah.
Like, somebody reached into his mouth and yanked everything out. There's his skin. Just...
Yeah.
And then she's like, ah! And... then... But, she's like, this has to... I gotta find out, like, what's happening here. So she doesn't want to come back to this swamp.
Clearly.
But, she's gotta do something. Like, she can't leave a dude's skin there.
No, you can. You can. It's human skin. You just leave.
Oh, it's not the Christian thing. He deserves a proper burial.
Go.
Okay. Anyway, so she folds it up and puts it in her satchel and goes back home. And she's like, "Oh man, this is weird. I gotta figure some of this out." And as she's leaving the swamp, she like kind of feels like there are eyes watching her, like a lot of them.
Okay.
So she doesn't really know what to do. Like, she gets stopped by her dad as soon as she gets home. And, he's being all, like, caring parent and, like, oh, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's totally fine. And, she's, like, just trying to play off, like, I got a human skin in my satchel. And I'm just trying to get somewhere safe here now. Thank you. How are you? Nothing? Okay.
No, nothing. Sorry.
Okay, so she basically just she has to stash it in her dresser drawer, and basically just she'll just be like, okay, I'll deal with this in the morning, and she's going to sleep, and then she has these nightmares about this lady that she doesn't know about, just swearing vengeance on all the townspeople. And in her dream, her dad's there, and her neighbors are there, and all of her friends are there. And she's like, she wakes up in a cold sweat, like, oh, what's going on? And then there's a mob of people outside, all demanding, basically demanding her head. Like, you know what this means, blah, blah, blah. It's like, when she visited this one place, a bunch of weeds started growing, and blah, blah, blah. Basically just making all these witch accusations. And so, she's like, shit, I gotta bail. And then she notices, like, a sound coming from her dresser drawer. And it's weird. Like, it sounds like a voice, but not quite a voice. She opens it up, and the skin is talking in this raspy sort of like talking.
Yeah, burn the witch.
And it's basically telling her, like, how to escape, like which way is safe. So she follows the skin's instructions, and she's able to basically get around the townsfolk. And she's like going through the woods, and there's an old graveyard. Never a good sign when you're on the run from, people who want to burn you as a witch, and now your friend Skin is talking. And all of a sudden, these corpses just kind of crawl out of the ground.
Ah.
And some of them, like, a couple of them are on fire. for some reason. Just, whatever. They're on fire. Flaming skeletons. Sure. And they're not attacking. Because they're on her side. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, and that's like into first issue or first trade?
It's in the first trade. And so they're basically like standing aside to let her pass, and they're like, you go ahead, we'll deal with the mob of angry people. And so she's like, ah. Now she's finding out basically that all the stuff in the forest that was giving her all these bad vibes are like totally on her side, until she comes upon this shack. And in this shack is this giant sort of goat monster demon who just fucking hates her.
So Satan.
Not really Satan.
Okay.
It's very clear that it was a servant of Hester. But, like, he recognizes her as Hester. But, he's very upset that for the last 18 years, she basically abandoned him.
You could have called.
And, yeah, so he's just feeling very sort of neglected, and he's basically like, I want you to leave. I don't ever want to see you again. You're not a good friend, basically. I'm being a little facetious here, but, it's... And, okay, so basically all we see in the comic of this monster is basically just pieces of him. Like, we see an eye, and it's like that rectangular sort of peanut-shaped goat eye.
Uh-huh.
Fur is completely black, but we know he has, like, big-ass claws. Like, able to grab a person big.
Okay.
And so, basically very, very tense moment. And she just kind of goes, okay, well, I'm still not Hester, so please don't be mad at me. And basically she just kind of goes off and, tries to find safety. And then she gets caught by townspeople. And they're, about to basically execute her. And who else is there? Her dad, with a shotgun. Basically going like, Amy, you're my baby. So if anybody's gotta put you down, it's gonna be me.
Whoa, not cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very like, it's that trope in those sort of witch movies where people kind of lose their sense and they go into mob mentality, where you kind of wish you could shake sense into them, but you can't. So where does help come from? Well, so you know how skin usually has stuff inside?
Yeah.
So down comes this crazy freaking, like, no skin having boogin that just starts punching the shit out of people and clawing and just kicking all the ass.
Okay, and was it the thing that was in the kid skin?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like, it's two friends for the price of one.
Ugh.
But, yeah, we actually learned that they work, they're separate, but they're part of the same whole. So the skin is able to tell Emmy what the rest of the body sees. And what the rest of the body hears and everything like that. That's how it was able to tell her, like, which way was safe to go. Because, yeah, he was basically, like, hopping from tree to tree, scoping out in front, telling her, like, okay, this way's safe. And so what it basically comes down to is she basically pleads with the townsfolk, saying like, listen, yes, technically, I guess I am in control of these haints that are just all around the town, and like there's all these freaking monsters that are just like surrounding the townspeople now, just like she's like, listen, I know you think I know what you think I am, but you also know who I am, and you've known me for 18 years. You know I wouldn't freaking like do anything to hurt you, dumbasses. And then everybody's like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And then, she kind of doubles down. Like, that being said, if any of you try and hurt me or my family ever again, I'm going to look the other way while my friends do what they want to do to you.
Dark. But good.
Yeah. So everybody's like, oh, yeah, well, I don't really like it, but what are you going to do? And so the town kind of retreats to a sort of uneasy peace. And now they're basically just giving Emmy and her dad all this, like, free stuff to, like, try and earn her favor as the town witch.
Nice.
And so this is all stuff that just happens in the first volume. And so there's other volumes where... So there's Twice Told, and then there's Snake Doctor, Family Tree, and the last one so far is Abandoned.
Man, you own a lot of these.
Yeah. And it turns into a really, really good story. Like, it expands the lore, and it also really is a good retelling of classic sort of Southern haunting stories. So, definitely worth checking out, I think. And I think I'm just about out of time anyway. So, yeah. Really good writing, really good concept, and the art is really, really nice too.
Yeah, how does the art look? Is it sort of like classic comic style, or I know a lot of horror comics go for like the more realistic style where it's like very, very dark, lots of like oil painting looking things.
Actually, it sort of has a little bit of a watercolor vibe to it.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to go, but it's done really well. So yeah, I guess we should probably just do our wrap up here. So Bart, favorite thing about Highlander?
I love the sword fights. There's a lot of them, and they're really good. Sparks flying everywhere, cutting down things. There's a scene where the Kurgan's attacking him and like forensics lady, and he just like he doesn't have a sword with him because it's still in the parking garage, and he grabs like a pipe and he's just like blocking him with that as much as he can.
Nice. All right, so least favorite thing.
I hate anything that came after the original movie. I think they should just remake the original movie and just have Christopher Lambert play Ramirez.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, because he's still acting. He was in the second Ghost Rider film, and he was in it for like 5 minutes, which is a gross misuse of Christopher Lambert.
Yeah, but maybe he's just too expensive.
Maybe. Well, what's he doing? Anyways.
So who would enjoy Highlander?
If you are that age of like, if you like grew up in the 80s, you already love Highlander. If you're like in high school, go watch it. You'll have fun with it. It's just a good fun action movie that doesn't try too hard.
Nice.
Yeah. And Pete, for you, so Harrow County, what do you love about it?
Let's see. I love the storytelling, and I love sort of the contemporization of old ghost stories.
So when does it take place? I mean, I guess we should have asked that.
Well, like I said, it's like sometime between Emancipation
Proclamation and the finale of Civil War.
Let's call it, I want to say sometime like 19...
No, because that's like Civil War era. That's like 1860 something.
Yeah, but it's between the Emancipation and the Civil Rights Movement. So I want to say it's like early 1900s.
Civil Rights Movement? I thought you meant Civil War.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Plus, the Emancipation Proclamation came like towards the end of the Civil War.
Yeah, that's why I was like, oh, that's only a couple months they have to play with. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What do you hate about it?
I don't really
Gotta come up with something.
hate too much about it, but it does tend to paint a pretty stereotypical picture of Southerners being overly superstitious.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I had a beer bottle broken over my head for talking about evolution in a bar when I was in the South.
Wait, what? You never told me this story.
I'm positive I told you this story.
You never told me this story. Go.
Okay, so me and a friend were just having a discussion in a bar. I bring up Charles Darwin, and next thing I know, crack over my head, a broken beer bottle. And those things hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beer bottle.
Yeah, like you see those things break in the movies, and you're like, oh, that's just something that happens to get someone's attention. No, that shit, like, my ears were ringing.
Yeah, dude, because the movies use stunt glass.
Yeah, they do. They use sugar glass. Anyway,
who's Harrow County good fit for, Pete?
If you like, if you like ghost story sort of horror, or sort of those southern origin campfire stories, then definitely check out Harrow County. And if you're looking for a new sort of outlet of horror, where if you're anything like me, then cinema has definitely been letting you down in the horror department, with the exception of the remake of It. But I'm not going to get into that now. But horror lately has been just a disappointment, because it's all just been jump scares and booga booga booga, and that works twice, and they use it like 12 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
That's about it for us for this week. Thank you to OK Go for the use of their song Here It Goes Again off the album Oh No. You know them. You don't know us. You can catch me on Twitter at BeatPanelComic.
And you can catch me on Twitter at PeterKennyArt.
And Pete, do you know what you're going to do next week?
Nope.
You're not going to do It?
It's a little too new, so nah, I don't think so.
You can still do it. I mean, it's not like nobody knows like the story of It. I mean, you can watch the old ones. I'm doing Iron Chef.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Love me some Iron Chef. All right, thanks for listening, folks.
Bye, Sponch.
Bye, Sponch.